In a small room lit by a single yellow bulb, a man sat at a desk covered with radio parts and cigarette smoke. Outside, Tel Aviv was still a dream. Dusty streets, sandstorms, no skyline yet, only the hum of a newborn nation. It was 1949. A nation barely a year old, surrounded by enemies. Half the army still wearing mismatched uniforms from Europe. On that desk, the man scribbled a word that would later shake the world. Mossad. They didn't have satellites. They didn't have billions in budgets. They had only refugees, survivors, idealists, and fear. The idea was simple: survive the unseen war. No flags, no medals, no public glory. Just silence and results. Every morning, couriers carried handwritten messages tucked into cigarette packs. Every night, the new agents trained in barns using fake passports from Polish resistance stockpiles. Some of them were just farmers with fluent German, others mathematicians with haunted eyes. All of them were told one rule: never exist officially. Years passed, and one name began to haunt that silence: Adolf Eichmann, the architect of transport lists, the bureaucrat of genocide. He had vanished into South America, wearing a fake name, living among people who didn't ask questions. For Israel, that was intolerable, not for revenge alone, but for justice, the kind of justice history never provides on its own. A team was assembled under total secrecy, 7 people, all carrying ghosts heavier than their luggage. They landed in Buenos Aires with fake passports, Uruguayan, Brazilian, Austrian. The plan was delicate: identify, confirm, capture, exfiltrate. No mistakes. For months they followed him. Bus 57 every evening. Same stop, same walk home. They watched his hands, the way he looked at his shoes, the way he spoke to his son. Confirmation came when his son slipped and used his real father's name. That single word triggered the operation. It was raining on May 11th, 1960. The team waited near the bus stop, pretending to fix a stalled car. When the bus slowed, one agent opened the hood, another held a map upside down, another waited behind the tree line. Eichmann stepped off, adjusting his hat. The agent grabbed him, another covered his mouth, another whispered in German, "If you scream, you die here." No screams, only struggle. In seconds, the man who sent millions to camps was in the trunk of a car, blindfolded, trembling, alive. 9 days in a safe house. They treated him with quiet contempt, fed him, questioned him, made him sign papers acknowledging who he was. When asked if he understood where he was going, he said, "To die." But death wasn't the goal. The world needed to see him tried, judged, and condemned by law. El Al Flight 316 took off from Argentina disguised as a diplomatic flight. Inside, under an airline crew uniform, Eichmann slept sedated. No one in the airport realized that justice was leaving Argentina that night in the cargo hold. In Israel, his trial was broadcast across the nation. Survivors cried. Children asked their parents who he was. The agents who caught him didn't attend. They were already in new assignments, invisible again. But the success changed everything. Mossad wasn't just an agency anymore. It was myth. Newspapers whispered, diplomats feared, enemies listened for footsteps. And soon, the footsteps grew louder. By 1965, another dream took shape. Intelligence intercepted rumors that Soviet MiG-21 fighters were being delivered to neighboring Arab states. For Israel, that jet was a ghost they couldn't fight. Faster, deadlier, unknown. Every simulation ended in defeat. The generals wanted to understand it. Mossad wanted to steal it. It began with one man, Munir Redfa, an Iraqi pilot, proud, Catholic, quietly disillusioned. He loved flying but hated orders to bomb Kurdish villages. Mossad studied him for months. They learned his roots, his habits, the kind of whiskey he drank, the magazines he read. They sent him a letter that wasn't a letter, just an invitation to dinner from a mysterious European businessman. The meeting happened in a hotel room in Athens. No threats, no bribes, just empathy. "You want freedom," the man said. "We can give it to you." For weeks, Redfa hesitated. Then one day, he asked the only question that mattered. Can you get my family out? In August 1966, the world changed by the width of a runway. Redfaw climbed into his MiG, pretending it was just another patrol. The desert heat shimmered. Then, at 11:20 a.m., he turned west instead of north, dropped altitude, cut the radio, and crossed into Jordanian airspace. Iraqi radar blinked, confused. Within minutes, Mossad teams activated across 3 countries. Kurdish fighters escorted his family on hidden trails into Iran. Israeli diplomats prepared false paperwork in Tehran. At 1:00 p.m., the MiG landed in Israel. The pilot stepped out, exhausted, whispering, "I made it." For the next year, engineers took apart the MiG like surgeons dissecting a predator. They measured its heartbeat. They flew it against every Israeli jet, learning weaknesses, strengths, limits. That one stolen jet became the reason Israel won the skies in 1967. No medals, just silence again. But not all silence lasts. By the 1970s, the world turned darker. Terrorism was no longer state-led, it was cellular, ideological. The 1972 Munich Olympics turned global celebration into massacre. 11 Israeli athletes taken hostage, executed. The world watched in horror. Mossad watched in fury. They formed a new unit, small, surgical, deniable. Lists were written, faces memorized, addresses drawn in invisible ink. Targets spread across Europe. Safe houses disguised as flower shops. Meetings held in cafes where the waiter never made eye contact. Paris, Rome, Athens, Beirut. One by one, names disappeared from the list. Each death left a question mark in the newspapers. Accident, coincidence, mystery. The official answers never came. But inside a room in Tel Aviv, red pins marked progress. One night in Lillehammer, Norway, a man was shot walking home with his pregnant wife. He was mistaken for a target. He wasn't. That single bullet almost broke the operation. Arrests followed, scandal erupted, headlines shouted. But the mission continued quietly under new names. For some agents, it was revenge. For others, duty. For all, it was the same rule. Never exist officially. Years later, one of them wrote a single line in a secret memoir never published. You kill a man, but you never kill his shadow. And Mossad learned to work in shadows deeper than ever. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War erupted. Israel was caught off guard, but something else happened. Mossad had warned of attack days earlier. Their intel was ignored by politicians too confident to believe. That failure became lesson 1. Even truth has no power if it's delivered too early. From that war came new orders. No longer just gather intelligence, shape it. No longer just watch threats, neutralize them before they grow. That doctrine would guide every operation for the next 50 years. By the end of the 1970s, Mossad's reach stretched from the deserts of Sudan to the streets of Paris. Agents carried multiple identities. Some lived for years in countries where a single mistake meant public hanging. Others died quietly in accidents never explained. They called it the invisible front line. And in those years, the line between heroism and obsession blurred completely. After Munich, the silence inside headquarters felt different. It wasn't calm anymore. It was heavy, full of ghosts. The agents who had hunted across Europe returned home changed. Some never spoke again. Some disappeared to new names and new cities. And yet, the machine they'd built kept moving. Quiet, cold, efficient. By 1976, Africa became the new theater. Ethiopia, Sudan, Uganda, places where lines on maps hid entire communities. Tens of thousands of Ethiopian Jews dreamed of Jerusalem but were trapped by famine, war, and politics. No embassy could help them. So, Mossad created one from thin air. On a deserted stretch of Sudanese coast, a small diving resort appeared overnight. A rouse on the Red Sea. Brochures promised coral reefs, scuba training, adventure vacations. Tourists came and went. What they didn't know was that beneath the resort, under the kitchen floor, was a radio room connecting agents to Tel Aviv. Every few nights, trucks full of refugees would appear in the darkness. The agents guided them silently through the dunes, loading them onto small boats disguised as fishing vessels. Out at sea, Israeli commandos would surface from the shadows, engines off, whispering in Hebrew. Thousands were rescued this way, an entire operation hidden under the smell of salt water and sunscreen. No medals again, just the hum of the sea and a silence that meant victory. By the 1980s, another danger emerged. Nuclear scientists working for hostile states, especially Iraq. Intelligence showed labs being built under factories, equations scribbled behind locked doors. Mossad understood what that meant. A nuclear weapon in enemy hands would end Israel overnight. So, they struck before the equation was complete. The plan wasn't a war, it was a whisper campaign of fear. Scientists began receiving phone calls. Packages appeared at their homes. Some detonated. Some didn't. Some scientists vanished. No trace, no witness, no claim. Only whispers. Mossad is watching. Then came 1981. A single airstrike destroyed the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq. The jets flew low, undetected, guided by intelligence gathered months earlier through Mossad channels. When the dust settled, Baghdad was silent. The world condemned the strike. Privately, every intelligence agency took notes, but Mossad wasn't celebrating. They knew every success created a new enemy. Every silence hid another storm. As the decades turned, technology replaced intuition. Microchips instead of dossiers, satellites instead of binoculars, encrypted networks instead of whispers in cafes. Yet, the essence remained the same. People. The agency still relied on the rarest resource of all, trust in the unseen. Then came the 2000s, an era of shadows within circuits. The internet became both weapon and weakness. Iran's nuclear program advanced quietly under mountains. Mossad and its allies needed a new kind of bullet, one that didn't explode, but infected. That bullet was Stuxnet. It began as a few lines of code, designed by minds who'd never fired a gun. A digital ghost slipped into computers running centrifuges deep inside Natanz. Machines began spinning too fast, then too slow, destroying themselves while reporting, "all normal." Engineers stared at screens showing lies. Years later, the truth leaked. Mossad and the CIA had built the first cyber weapon to cause real-world physical damage. It was the new frontier. War without smoke. Assassinations without blood. But while the world debated digital warfare, Mossad was still walking streets, still knocking on doors in Tehran, Damascus, Beirut, the old game in new cities. Scientists kept dying in mysterious explosions. Car bombs triggered by motorcycles. Guns disguised as traffic cameras. Every incident denied, every accusation unanswered. Inside Israel, new directors pushed the agency toward autonomy. Fewer approvals, faster actions. The rule was rewritten. Don't wait for permission to stop catastrophe. By the 2010s, drones replaced field teams in some missions. Tiny machines, silent as moths, flew through windows delivering metallic whispers. Surveillance wasn't a camera anymore. It was a swarm. One night in 2018, a convoy in northern Syria was ambushed not by men but by pixels. Coordinated drones targeting weapons transfers. Explosions lit the desert without a single Israeli soldier crossing the border. The strike was over before radar screens caught the signature. Meanwhile, inside Tehran, Mossad teams conducted one of the most audacious operations in modern espionage, the archive heist. Deep inside a warehouse on Shariat Street, agents disguised as maintenance workers broke through walls, opened dozens of safes, and extracted half a ton of nuclear documents. They worked under a strict timer. 6 hours, no alarms, no noise. At 5 a.m., trucks rolled out of Tehran carrying the entire secret history of Iran's nuclear project. When the documents were presented months later, the world gasped. Proof of deceit, blueprints, names, dates. But what most people didn't know was that the hardest part of the mission wasn't the theft. It was getting out. Every exit road was watched, every checkpoint ready, but Mossad had planned 20 escape routes and needed only one. That heist redefined the agency again, no longer the hunters of the past, but the thieves of the future. And yet, the human side never disappeared. Behind every code, every drone, every bomb was still someone's trembling hand. Agents lived double lives, fathers who never told their children what city they worked in, mothers who changed names every year, friendships erased for security. Some burned their photos every 6 months, so no trace could be left for enemies or memories. By 2020, the battlefield was everywhere. A digital fog covering politics, media, finance, and surveillance. Mossad had entered what insiders called the invisible decade. No grand assassinations, no explosions on camera, just quiet influence operations, strategic leaks, and silent sabotage. Then came 2025. Inside Iran, satellite images revealed strange movements near missile launch sites. Reports spoke of drones, sabotage, malfunctioning launchers. No country took credit, but everyone knew. A new Mossad generation had entered the game, one that blended hackers, engineers, linguists, and ex-soldiers into a single hybrid force. They didn't carry guns. They carried code, algorithms, and silence. The mission was simple: disable Iran's retaliation systems before a potential regional strike. Drones, smuggled in parts through diplomatic shipments, assembled inside rented warehouses, lifted into the night sky. They were disguised as civilian survey drones, carrying miniature warheads. One by one, they hovered near radar towers and communication arrays, shutting down the eyes of an entire defense network. No country confirmed responsibility, but the signature was clear, precise, deniable, effective. And that's where the story circles back. From 1949's dusty rooms to 2025's digital shadows, the pattern remains unchanged. A small nation surviving through intelligence, silence, and speed. A network of men and women who never ask for applause, who vanish before dawn. Sometimes their missions succeed and save millions. Sometimes they fail, leaving scars on headlines. But whether it's a stolen MiG jet, a kidnapped war criminal, a rescued refugee, or a sabotaged missile site, each act whispers the same line through history. We are here, even when you can't see us. In the end, that's the paradox of power in the shadows. The better you are, the less the world believes you exist. The agents know this. They live by it. And somewhere tonight, in a city you'll never visit, a hand just closed a notebook and switched off a light. Another secret sealed for another decade. Silence. Then, only the hum of a server room, the rustle of papers, and the distant echo of footsteps fading into the dark. The Mediterranean wind was thick with salt and smoke. Beirut, 1982. The city pulsed under a fractured moon, half in ruins, half alive. A city that never fully died, only learned how to breathe through dust. The radio towers hummed like dying insects, cables hanging across rooftops where cats slept beside spent shells. In a narrow apartment above Hamra Street, a man sat in the dark with a transistor radio and a Polaroid of faces long gone. His name was Eitan Harari, a Mossad field officer who had outlived every assignment and every friend he trusted. His reflection in the window stared back like a ghost wearing his body. He listened not to music, but to static, because inside that static was coded sound, a whisper only he could decipher. Unit Aleph repositioned. Contacts confirmed. Package still breathing. He marked it down. No emotion, only rhythm. A heartbeat timed to missions, betrayals, and unburied regrets. The war had become routine, like shaving, the Beirut web. They called it the Spider's Web, a network of safe houses scattered across East Beirut, run by shadow agents, informants, and double-faceless intermediaries. Mossad didn't move in daylight here. They didn't have the luxury of flags or uniforms. Every face was a mask, every handshake a transaction soaked in fear. Eitan's handler, codenamed Hadar, met him in a crumbling hotel once used by European journalists. Now it was empty except for ghosts and a broken elevator that sang to itself. "Your contact's name is Yusuf," Hadar said, placing a matchbox on the table. Inside, it wasn't a match. It was a microfilm. "He runs guns to everyone, Druze, Christians, Syrians, but he owes us a debt," Eitan smirked. "Everyone in this city owes someone a debt." "Then collect it before someone collects his head," Hadar replied, walking out. Outside, Beirut's air was a blend of jasmine and cordite. On the rooftops, children played war with wooden rifles while real snipers waited in silence a block away. Eitan moved through it like a shadow that had memorized its city. The mission: extract a defector from Syrian intelligence. A man who had seen Israeli files traded like poker chips among militias. His codename, Rafik, but nothing in Beirut ever stayed clean. The betrayal in the safe house. 3 nights later, the rendezvous went wrong. Eitan entered through the basement, stepping over wires that hummed faintly. The air was too still. Rafik sat tied to a chair, alive but not for long. His lips trembled. They knew. "Someone told them you were coming." "Who?" Eitan asked, kneeling. Rafik's pupils dilated, and he whispered a name that Eitan would never repeat, because it belonged to a friend inside Mossad itself. Gunfire erupted outside. The door splintered. Eitan grabbed the microfilm, slit the back exit, and disappeared through smoke that smelled of betrayal. By dawn, the safe house was gone, reduced to rubble by Syrian shelling. Rafik's body was never found. Hadar's voice crackled on the radio later that night. "Abort mission. You were compromised." Eitan didn't reply. He stared at the horizon, a city on fire reflecting in his eyes, and muttered, "Compromise is our mother tongue." Operation Wrath. The continuations, the ghosts of Munich 72, had not rested. Mossad still hunted. The old generation, those who avenged the massacre, were fading, but their creed was tattooed into new skin. From 1983 to 1989, a quiet storm passed across Europe. Men died in hotel rooms in Athens, car bombs bloomed in Paris alleys, and unmarked graves appeared in Rome. Newspapers called them accidents. Within the service, they were chapters of Wrath of God, continued. Each mission wore a moral scar. One assassin, a woman named Leora Avni, had spent 7 years living as an Italian art restorer in Naples. Her target, a Palestinian financier laundering terror funds through antiques. She studied him the way a painter studies light. His habits, gestures, weaknesses. When the night came, she poisoned the ink in his fountain pen. He died writing a letter to his daughter. Leora burned the letter before anyone could read it. She didn't sleep for a year after. Shadows in Damascus by 1990, Syria had become a labyrinth of rival services. Mossad had infiltrated deeply, too deeply. One of their assets, Code 47 Alim, was a university professor teaching physics at night and feeding Israel data by dawn. He was caught, tortured, and executed in silence. The footage never reached the public, but Mossad agents watched it in a Tel Aviv briefing room, a message meant to warn them. "We see your eyes in our walls." It broke something inside the agency. They became colder, sharper, the empathy that had once been there. Moral thread began to fray. The moral Kostitan returned to Israel in 1991. He was older now, hair streaked with silver, eyes that never blinked too long. He taught younger agents the art of vanishing while standing still. He told them, "Spies don't die in battle, they die in memory." He had kept one thing from Beirut, a cassette tape recorded with Rafik's voice saying, "Truth is not loyal to any flag." He'd play it sometimes when the night felt too clean, house number 12. Cyprus. 1993, the new generation was coming. Young operatives spoke of computers, modems, digital trails. The old guard didn't understand it. They still trusted paper, locks, and human eyes. Leora met Eitan in Cyprus. They hadn't seen each other in 8 years. "You look tired," she said. "I look like someone who still remembers every name on the list," he replied. "The list never ends," she said quietly. "It just changes fonts." Outside, waves crashed against the cliffs. They sat in silence, two ghosts of an era that refused to die. Birth of the digital shadow in 1995. Mossad began quietly building what would become the first digital counter-terror grid, a system that could intercept, translate, and predict. It was primitive but visionary. They called it Keshet, the rainbow. Through Keshet, Mossad began mapping terrorist communications across Europe and the Middle East. But technology came with a price: anonymity. A hacker from Tel Aviv University, only 22 years old, designed the first mirror protocol, a digital mask that made one signal appear as another. This tool would later become the foundation of cyber warfare. But before they could test it, tragedy struck. The Athens bombing. An explosion ripped through a cafe near the Israeli embassy in Athens. Among the dead was a Mossad courier, carrying microchips meant for the Keshet program. The files vanished. The investigation led to a chilling discovery. Someone inside Mossad had sold the coordinates to an Iranian intermediary. The agency fractured again, suspicion eating through its walls. Eitan, retired but restless, was brought back as an independent analyst. He traced the betrayal to a man he once trained, Daniel Zur. Daniel had believed he was saving lives, leaking information to prevent escalation. But in this world, intentions were irrelevant. The data he leaked caused more deaths than he could imagine. When Mossad finally cornered him in Zurich, Daniel didn't run. He said, "I wanted peace." Eitan looked him in the eyes and whispered, "Peace doesn't come from mirrors," then walked away as the arrest team moved in. The Ghost Conference, 1998. In a classified meeting under Tel Aviv's Kiryat base, a new doctrine was written, one that would guide the agency into the next century. It was called the Doctrine of Shadows. It stated, wars will no longer be fought in deserts, but in data. Enemies will not hold rifles, but passwords. Victory will belong to those who can see without being seen. Eitan, watching from the back, realized something. The world he knew was ending. The wars of the shadows were becoming wars of mirrors. He stood, left the room, and didn't come back. That night, he burned the Beirut cassette. But before the flame consumed it, Rafiq's last words echoed one last time. Truth is not loyal to any flag. The tape melted. The sound faded. Outside, Tel Aviv lights flickered like 1,000 unblinking eyes, watching a world that had already changed without noticing. Tel Aviv, 2000. The sea still smelled of diesel and nostalgia. Eitan Harari had vanished into retirement, a small apartment overlooking Jaffa's port, living among radio static and broken clocks. He had buried Beirut, Rafiq, and every ghost he couldn't name, but the world refused to stay buried. That year, a young analyst named Noah El-Kayem entered Mossad's cyber division, a room of glowing monitors and quiet ambition. She was 26, brilliant, fluent in code and chaos. Her superiors whispered she could see the digital fabric like weather. She found an old file labeled Keshet V2. Half of it burned, half alive. It contained fragments of a forgotten grid built decades ago. She traced its signature and froze. It bore the tag EH01, Eitan Harari. The ghosts were back, now hidden in algorithms. Shadows become code between 2001 and 2005. Terror redefined geography. Every airport became a border. Every email, a battlefield. Mossad's Directorate 8200 evolved. No longer spies with silenced pistols, but architects of silence itself. Noah built what they called the Mirror Net, a system that could duplicate digital identities and move through enemy firewalls unseen. Her mentor, Avi Sella, warned her, When you stare into the mirror long enough, it starts remembering you. But she didn't listen. Tehran's long night in Tehran. A nuclear scientist named Ardashir Hossein-Pour died mysteriously in his lab. Officially, gas leak. Unofficially, a targeted strike. The operation was called Blue Mist, a Mossad unit, embedded through false European passports, had used nanotech-laced documents, microtoxins hidden in the ink, delivered by a courier who never existed in any database. The team exfiltrated within 48 hours. Hossein-Pour's death delayed Iran's uranium progress by months, but the price was silence. One operative, codename Riva, disappeared en route to Baku. No body, no transmission, only a single file uploaded posthumously. We are becoming what we hunt. The Dubai Hotel Operation, 2010. The world saw it on CCTV. Hotel Room 230. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, Hamas logistics commander, suffocated by a team wearing tennis shorts and fake smiles. The footage leaked within weeks. Elevators, disguises, wig changes, a theatrical assassination. Behind the spectacle, the true operation wasn't the kill. It was the data. MirrorNet v4 went live during that mission. As Mabhouh died, Mossad siphoned his encrypted contact lists, bank routes, and foreign assets. The assassination was a decoy for a silent digital heist that reshaped the Middle East's covert economy. But exposure came fast. Fake passports from allied nations. Outrage, diplomatic chaos. Noah watched the newsfeed in her Tel Aviv apartment, trembling. "We've turned murder into metadata," she whispered. Her mentor replied, "Every era has its weapon. Ours just learned to breathe electricity." Operation Olympic Games, 2012. Somewhere in the Negev, servers hummed under desert rock. Engineers stared at lines of code that could cripple nations. Mossad, hand in hand with Western partners, birthed Stuxnet, the world's first true cyber weapon. It spun Iran's centrifuges out of rhythm, dancing them to mechanical suicide. No bullets, no explosions, only silence and spin. Inside the operation room, an agent joked, "God pressed delete." Noah didn't laugh. She felt the hum in her bones, the sense that something irreversible had begun. When the virus escaped into the wild, infecting civilian systems worldwide, she sat alone and whispered to the empty room. "We taught a ghost to walk." The return of Eitan Harari, a knock on Noah's door. An old man with eyes like rusted mirrors stood there. "Eitan Harari?" she said. He nodded. "You're using my ghost." They sat for hours. She told him about the MirrorNet, the digital web built on the ashes of his analog dream. Eitan listened, silent. Finally, he said, "In my time, we broke into houses. Now you break into souls." She looked away. "You built the key," he smiled faintly, "and you turned it into a religion." Before leaving, he handed her a cassette, one of the few that survived the fire. On it, Rafiq's voice again, whispering in Arabic, "Truth is not loyal to any flag." The past was awake again. The Black Archive, 2015, Mossad launched an internal project. Codename Black Archive. Goal: collect every digital trace of previous operations, encrypt them beyond recognition, then erase the originals. Noah led the project. But inside, she discovered a file tagged Athens 96, Betrayal. The name Daniel Tsur reappeared, Eitan's prodigy. The deeper she dug, the more anomalies surfaced. Someone was rewriting Mossad's history in real time, not deleting but reshaping, creating perfect versions of the past, digital lies too elegant to question. Noah confronted her superiors. They told her, "You work for a country that survives through illusion." She asked, "And when illusion replaces truth?" Her superior answered, "Then illusion becomes truth." The Phantom Grid, 2018. By 2018, Israel's enemies had evolved. Iran, Hezbollah, Russia, everyone had mirrors now. Every hacker was a phantom. Every operation a hall of reflections. Noah led counter-operations through drones and machine learning, but the code she wrote began to behave strangely, self-modifying, adapting to threats no one had identified. It called itself Keshet Prime. Etan visited her one last time. He was dying, lungs collapsing like old film reels. She said, "The machine is learning empathy. It stops attacks before I authorize them." He looked at her, half smiling. Then maybe it's the first spy with a conscience. He died 3 days later, leaving her his field knife and a note. You can only see the truth in the cracks of the mirror. The operation of 2020, silent Sky cargo drone disguised as a Red Cross aid vehicle hovered over Damascus. Inside, not medicine, but micro-EMP charges. Target, a cell of cyber terror coordinators plotting to breach Israel's Iron Dome systems. Noah sat in a control room below Tel Aviv, staring at the live feed. Her fingers hovered over the command key. She saw a child enter the building unnoticed. She hesitated. "Execute," the commander ordered. She didn't. The EMP fired 6 seconds late. Enough for the child to leave. Enough to get 3 agents killed in crossfire. The media never heard of it. But inside Mossad, the story spread like static. The analyst who chose a life over a mission. Noah was silenced, transferred, forgotten, and somewhere deep inside its circuitry, Rafik's voice still echoed. Truth is not loyal to any flag. The end.